Good day, everyone. I am Elaine.
And I am Alex.
And I am Cyril. We are the first group and we will discuss English in the Philippines and communication in multicultural setting.
First, we'll discuss about English in the Philippines. The history of the English language continues as Middle English became Modern English, which is spoken today. English medium education began in the Philippines in 1901. English was made the language of education, and as its use extended, it became indigenized through the inclusion of vocabulary from local languages, the adoption of English words to local needs, and modification in pronunciation and grammar. English was also adapted for newspapers and magazines, the media, and literary writing.
With more than 100 indigenous languages, the Philippines is a multilingual paradise. This diversity of language mirrors the myriad of subcultures that manifests the differences of the Filipinos' linguistic repertoire. For example, in Tagalog-speaking regions, po and opo are used as politeness markers, but these are absent in Visayan languages. The need to unify the people through a national language was addressed by the creation of the Surian ng Wikang Pambansa. But English remains a default language for non-Tagalog speakers. In addition, the extensive use of English in the controlling domains of language like education, business, international relations, and the bilingual education policy of the 1970s institutionalized English as a second language of Filipinos. With the diaspora of Filipino OFWs and migrants to many different parts of the world today, English is the language of global citizenship.
The linguistic repertoire of the Filipino. Note, repertoire is all the skills or remembered performances of a particular person. As far as prehistory is concerned, the inhabitants of this archipelago have been multilingual, speaking their local vernaculars, but likewise speaking a regional lingua franca which allowed intertribal communication. With the coming of the Spaniards, the elites, especially of Manila and the main urban centers, began to add Spanish to the repertoire. With the Americans, still another foreign language was added, English. Note: lingua franca is a language that is adopted as a common language between speakers whose native language are different. With the development of the national language beginning in 1937, the use of Tagalog, renamed Filipino and later Filipino, became widespread so that the latest census indicates that more than 85% of Filipinos now speak at least a colloquial variety of this language, or what we in psycholinguistic terminology would call basic interpersonal communicative skills. Note: Creole is a mother tongue formed from the contact of two languages through an earlier pidgin stage. Taglish, an English-based Mesolithic Creole spoken in the Philippines, Filipino English. The English language as used in the Philippines, a state of Southeast Asia consisting of more than 7,000 islands. The 1980 census counted the number of Filipinos with some competence in English as around 65%, some 35 million people. Ability ranges from a smattering of words and phrases through passive comprehension to near native mastery.
Loans and translations from local usages. Philippine English is influenced by local culture. It has distinct phonological features. English words borrowed by Tagalog are mostly modern and technical terms. But English words are also used for short usage to avoid literal translation and repetition, of the same particular Tagalog word. Note: phonological is a branch of linguistics that studies how language or dialects systematically organize their sound.
Turn on the light.
Open the light.
Turn off the light.
Close the light. Explanation. I think the reason why Filipinos do this is because the direct translation is, buksan ng ilaw, which is open the light, and then, but I don't know why the turn off the light is close the light, because the direct translation is kill the light.
Grammar. Mostly, Filipinos have wrong grammar when speaking English. For example, wrong. Sorry, I'm late. It was traffic. The correct one is, oh, sorry, I'm late. There was heavy traffic. Another example is wrong. Could you make a Xerox copy of this paper? The correct one must be, could you please make a photocopy of this paper? Filipinos feel intimidated by someone who speaks fluent in English. Lack of practice is another problem. Students have so little time to speak and write English. In school, they spend an hour in English class where they are supposed to learn to be conversant in the language.
In written models, because of the influence of reading and writing and the academic context in which English is learned, local speech tend to be based on written models. For example, leopard for leopard, subtle for sable. Code switching. A register has developed for rapport and intimacy that depends on code mixing and code switching between Filipino and English. And code switching is when the speaker alternate between on two or more languages in one conversation. For example, pwede ba tayo mag-dinner sa Barney's Burger later? I want protein. Social group membership, geographical location, and first language background account for marked variation in phonological patterns among Philippine English speakers. There are three speech styles, which is acrolate, upper class, employed as speech styles for approximate formal American English. Next is mesolate middle. Mesolate is a middle class, has slight difference from the standard, but these do not generally affect communication. And Basilite is a lower class, is heavily affected by their first language. Communication in multicultural setting. Important there is an understanding of these cultural polarities to become more globally competitive and culturally sensitive. In addition, working relationship can be strengthened through intercultural communication. However, the greatest barrier to achieving this goal is ethnocentrism, the tendency or disposition to judge other people's culture with disfavor and to consider one's own and begin superior to others. Cultural differences that account for the variation of communication style, nonverbal codes, values, attitude, and gender. Racial bias are challenges that have to be meant to ensure successful communication experience in the workplace. In communicative competence, the ability to use appropriate language and tone in various discourse contexts does not suffice. In communicative competence, there are examples like communication skills for the workplace success. First, listening. Being a good listener is one of the best way to be a good communicator. Next, nonverbal communication. Your body language, eye contact, hand gesture, and tone of voice all color the message you are trying to convey.
Intercultural communication requires understanding dominant cultural and values and understanding how our own culture values affect the way we perceive ourselves and others. This goal cannot be achieved without full consciousness of how one's own culture has shaped his communication style. Example of intercultural communication. Language difference makes international business companies difficult to adjust to local environment and culture. For instance, Coca-Cola Company once tried to find a phonetic equivalent of their brand to be used in China, and though of using Coca-Cola, but the meaning of the terms made them change their decision, as the direct translation of those words would be bite the wax tadpole or female horse stuffed with wax. When people from two different cultural groups or people from the same ethnic or racial background interact, intercultural communication takes place. It is to exchange ideas and cultural norms in the spirit of mutual understanding and respect. Finally, the following suggestions are offered to enhance intercultural communication in the workplace. Acknowledgement and respect diversity. Be more knowledgeable about the cultural dimension of language. Become more self-aware. Recognize one's biases and prejudice. Be flexible, patient, and humble. Advocate equity in the workplace. One has to have awareness on intercultural communication to understand interlocutors who come from various linguistic and cultural backgrounds. Ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is the greatest barrier of intercultural communication. It is the tendency or disposition to judge other people's culture with disfavor and to consider one's own as being superior of the other. An example of ethnocentrism in culture is the Asian culture across all the countries of Asia. Throughout Asia, the way of eating is to use chopsticks with every meal. These people may find it unnecessary to find that people in other societies, such as the American societies, eat using forks, spoons, knives, and etc.
Culture taboos, practices prescribed by a particular society as being improper or acceptable given the culture. An example of this is in many Jewish and Muslim communities, people are forbidden from eating pork. Another example is that politeness is a universal axiom. How is this manifested varies across cultures. Personal space varies among culture. Generally, the amount of space between speakers defines the relationship between gender, age, and social status. But culture will also have an effect on how a person defines personal space. In contact cultures like South America, Middle East, Southern Europe, people tend to stand close to each other and touch frequently as they converse. However, in non-contact cultures like Japan, US, and UK, people tend to maintain more space and often less touch when they are engaged in conversation. Hence, a person's personal space is marked by the distance he keeps when communicating with another. The notion of politeness is ascribed in all cultures. Thus, the basics in maintaining good interpersonal relationships ought to be observed. Verbal and non-verbal messages should be delivered in a way that these do not offend the sensibilities of the other. If by chance accepted rules of behavior, verbally and non-verbally, are intentionally violated or FOX pass, sincere apologies are called for.